The old recording played on a loop in Admiral Grace's private quarters. She had watched it hundreds of times over the years, but tonight she watched it with different eyes. The footage was grainy, 3 centuries old, showing a broken human colony ship drifting helplessly near the nebula. 40,000 souls trapped inside a metal coffin, waiting to die in the cold darkness of space. Then the ships arrived. Grace leaned forward in her chair as she watched the sleek, iridescent vessels surround the crippled human ship. They were beautiful creatures. Their skin glowed with soft bioluminescence, shifting colors like the surface of a pearl. They had large, gentle eyes and 3-fingered hands that moved with careful precision. They were amphibians, equally comfortable in water or air, and their technology was elegant and advanced. They owed humanity nothing. The two species had never met before that moment. They could have simply passed by, could have ignored the distress signal, could have decided that helping these strange creatures was not worth the risk or the resources. Instead, they stopped. For 17 days, they worked without rest to repair the human colony ship. They shared their food, their medicine, their knowledge. When the human captain tried to offer payment, tried to negotiate some kind of trade agreement, the commander simply smiled with his wide, lipless mouth. "We help because we can," he said through the translator device. "This is what civilized beings do. Someday, perhaps, you will help another who needs it." The colony ship made it to its destination. Those 40,000 humans went on to build one of the most prosperous settlements in human space. They named their capital City's Gift, and every year on the anniversary of their rescue, they held a festival of gratitude. Humanity never forgot. Grace turned off the recording and stood up slowly. She was 63 years old, her hair silver, her face lined with decades of service. She had commanded ships in 3 different conflicts, had negotiated peace treaties and trade agreements, had represented humanity on the Galactic Council. But nothing in her long career had prepared her for the message she had received an hour ago. She walked to the observation window and stared out at the stars. The carrier Enduring Promise was one of the largest ships in the human fleet, a massive vessel capable of deploying hundreds of fighters and carrying thousands of crew. It was a symbol of human military power, a reminder that the species that had crawled out of the mud on a dangerous planet called Earth had become a force to be reckoned with. But tonight Grace did not feel powerful. She felt angry. She felt sad. She felt a cold determination settling into her bones. The door chimed and she turned. "Enter." Lieutenant Commander Danny Brooks stepped inside. He was young, barely 30, with dark skin and intelligent eyes. He served as her communications officer, and right now his face was pale with shock. "Admiral," he said, his voice tight, "we have confirmed the reports. The Dominion has attacked. The is under orbital bombardment." Grace closed her eyes for a moment. She had hoped somehow that the first reports were wrong, that it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, anything other than the truth. "Casualties?" she asked quietly. Danny swallowed hard. "Estimates are already in the millions, Admiral. They are targeting civilian centers, hospitals, schools. They are not making any demands. They are not trying to conquer. They are trying to exterminate." "Why?" Grace demanded. "They have no military. They pose no threat to anyone." "Intelligence suggests they have been sheltering refugees from worlds they have conquered. The Dominion considers this an act of war." Grace felt something cold and sharp crystallize in her chest. Those gentle, peaceful beings who had saved 40,000 human lives simply because it was the right thing to do were being murdered for showing that same kindness to others. "The Galactic Council?" she asked. Danny shook his head. "They have called an emergency session. They are debating whether intervention is appropriate. Early indications suggest they will issue a statement of concern and call for diplomatic negotiations." "A statement of concern," Grace repeated flatly, "while millions die." "The Council is afraid of the Admiral. The Dominion has conquered 11 worlds in the last 50 years. No one wants to be next. Grace turned back to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, on a world called, beings who had once saved her ancestors were watching their children burn. She thought about the captain from the old recording. We help because we can. Someday, perhaps, you will help another. Danny, she said slowly, get me a secure channel to Fleet Command. Priority Alpha. Yes, Admiral, what should I tell them? Grace turned to face him, and something in her expression made him take a step back. He had served under Admiral for 5 years, had seen her in combat, had watched her negotiate with hostile species. He had never seen her look like this. Tell them that humanity remembers its debts, she said. Tell them I am requesting immediate authorization for a full military response, and tell them that if authorization is delayed, I will act on my own authority and accept the consequences. Danny stared at her. Admiral, that would be career suicide. You would be court-martialed. Maybe, Grace agreed, but I will not stand by while they are exterminated. I will not let their kindness be repaid with human cowardice. She paused. Send the message, Danny, and then broadcast on all human frequencies, civilian and military. Tell them what is happening. Tell them about the debt we owe. Tell them that anyone who wants to help should rendezvous at Beacon Station. You think people will come? Grace allowed herself a small, grim smile. They saved our ancestors 300 years ago. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. They simply helped because they could. She walked toward the door, her stride purposeful. Now it is time for humanity to show the galaxy what that kindness bought them. Send the message, Lieutenant Commander, and then prepare for war. She stepped onto the bridge of the enduring promise, and every officer present turned to look at her. They had all seen the reports. They all knew what was happening. Set course for Beacon Station, Grace commanded. Maximum speed, and someone get me a count of every human ship within 50 light years. She sat down in her command chair and stared at the, we have a debt to pay. The enduring promise turned toward the distant stars, and across human space, the message began to spread. They were dying. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was about to remind everyone why some debts should never be forgotten. The response began within hours. Grace stood on the command deck of Beacon Station, watching her tactical display fill with icons. Each icon represented a human ship dropping out of hyperspace, and there were so many that the computer had to zoom out 3 times just to show them all. They came from everywhere. Warships from the core worlds, their hulls and their weapons fully loaded. Patrol vessels from the outer colonies, smaller but fast and deadly. Research ships that had been retrofitted with whatever weapons their crews could find. Mining vessels whose captains had welded armor plates to their hulls and mounted industrial lasers on their bows. They came because they remembered. Admiral arrived with the 3rd Fleet, 47 warships that had been conducting exercises near the Orion Arm. She was an old friend of Grace, a veteran of the same conflicts, and when she stepped onto the station, her face was set with grim determination. I came as fast as I could, said. My crews are ready. What is the situation? They have over 500 ships in orbit around, Grace replied. They are conducting systematic bombardment of population centers. Current estimates suggest 30 million dead, with the number rising every hour. His jaw tightened. What does Fleet Command say? They have authorized the mission. Took them 12 hours, but they came through. Grace paused. The president made a broadcast 2 hours ago. She called it a matter of national honor, said that humanity does not abandon its friends. Good, what is our strength? Grace led her to the main display. The tactical map showed the growing fleet, ships arriving in 1s and 2s and sometimes in entire squadrons. As of right now, we have 347 combat vessels, another 60 support ships, including hospital ships, repair tenders, and supply carriers. Against 500 warships, said quietly. Those are not good odds, Grace. I know, but we have something the do not have. What is that? Before Grace could answer, the door opened and a new group entered. These were not military officers. Dr. Torres led them, a small woman with tired eyes and steady hands. Behind her came doctors, nurses, trauma surgeons, and field medics from 43 civilian hospital ships. Admiral said, "My people are ready. We have operating theaters prepared, medical supplies stocked, and enough beds for 10,000 casualties." She hesitated. "We expect to need more." Grace nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Doctor. Your presence is invaluable." "The saved our ancestors," said simply. "We are here to return the favor, whatever it takes." After she left, looked at Grace with new understanding. That is what we have that the do not have. It is not just a military response. It is everyone. Yes, Grace agreed. They think this is a war. They are wrong. This is humanity settling a debt, and we take our debts very seriously. Over the next 48 hours, the fleet continued to grow. Commodore arrived with the Strike Division, sleek destroyers designed for speed and precision attacks. Captain brought the Special Operations Group, small ships crewed by the most skilled and daring pilots in human space. But it was not just warriors who came. Chief Engineer Carlos Vega worked without sleep in the maintenance bays, leading teams that installed new weapons systems on every ship that would accept them. These were systems that had been developed in secret, kept in reserve for exactly this kind of situation. Humanity had always invested heavily in military technology, even during times of peace. The galaxy had often wondered why. Now they would find out. On the third day, Grace called a meeting of all senior commanders. They gathered in the main conference room of Beacon Station, their holographic images flickering around the central table. Admirals, commodores, captains, and civilian leaders. Humans from a dozen different worlds, united by a common purpose. "Intelligence reports indicate they are aware of our gathering," Grace began. "They know we are coming. Their commander, Warlord Ran, has reportedly laughed at the news. He believes our numbers are too small to threaten him. He has conquered 11 worlds," said. "He has never lost a battle. His confidence is not without basis. His confidence is based on fighting species that think like he does," Grace replied. "Species that form battle lines, that follow predictable tactics, that retreat when losses become too heavy." She touched a control, and the display changed to show a complex series of attack patterns. "We will not fight like that." The room fell silent as the commanders studied the display. The patterns were chaotic, seemingly random, with ships splitting into dozens of small groups that moved in ways that were difficult to predict or counter. "This is the Cascade Protocol," Grace said. "It has never been used in actual combat. It was designed for exactly this situation, facing a numerically superior enemy that expects conventional tactics." She looked around the room. "It is aggressive. It is overwhelming. Some have called it terrifying." "Will it work?" asked. "Yes," Grace said with absolute certainty. "Because they have never faced an enemy that fights the way we do. They have never faced an enemy that is willing to take risks, to sacrifice, to push beyond all limits." She paused. "They have never faced humanity when we are angry." Spoke up. "What about after the battle? Assuming we win, what then?" Grace considered the question carefully. 300 years ago, they showed mercy to our ancestors. They could have ignored us. They could have demanded payment. Instead, they simply helped because it was the right thing to do. She looked at each of her commanders in turn. "We will honor that mercy. We will defeat them, but we will not become them. We will offer surrender terms. We will allow them to retrieve their wounded. We will show the galaxy that humanity can be merciful as well as mighty." The room was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "They would approve." "Yes," Grace agreed, "they would." The fleet departed Beacon Station the next morning, 347 warships and 60 support vessels jumping into hyperspace in perfect formation. Aboard each ship, crews prepared for battle. They checked their weapons, reviewed their assignments, and thought about why they were there. They thought about a colony ship, 3 centuries ago, drifting helplessly in the void. They thought about aliens who stopped to help simply because they could. They thought about a debt that had waited 300 years to be repaid. And as the fleet raced toward the greatest battle humanity had ever fought, Grace stood on the bridge of the enduring promise and felt something she had not expected. Pride. Not in herself, not in her ships or her weapons or her tactics. Pride in her species. Pride in a people who remembered kindness across centuries, who answered a call for help without hesitation, who were willing to fight and die to repay a debt that most of them had only read about in history books. The galaxy thought humans were soft, emotional, irrational. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Warlord Rand stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Crushing Fist, and watched the planet burn beneath him. Fires spread across the continents like glowing wounds, and plumes of smoke rose from destroyed cities. The oceans, once crystal blue, were gray with ash. It was beautiful in its way, the beauty of conquest, the beauty of power. Warlord, his tactical officer, called out. Sensors detect multiple hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system, human vessels. Rand turned slowly. He was massive even by standards, standing nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled body covered with ritual scars that marked his victories. His yellow eyes glowed with predatory intelligence. How many? He asked. Approximately 400 vessels, Warlord, a mix of military and civilian ships. Rand made a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. 400, against my 500. The humans are either brave or stupid. Perhaps both, Warlord. No matter, they are soft creatures. They evolved on a harsh world, yes, but they have grown comfortable, weak. They talk of diplomacy and cooperation while real powers like the Dominion take what they want. He gestured dismissively. Form the fleet into standard defensive positions. We will crush them quickly and return to our work. The fleet began to move, arranging itself into the battle formations that had brought them victory on 11 worlds. Their ships were powerful, heavily armed and armored, crewed by warriors who lived for combat. They had conquered species far older and more advanced than humanity. This would be no different. Or so Rand believed. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in a scattered formation that made the tactical officers frown in confusion. Instead of forming battle lines, the human ships immediately split into dozens of small groups that began moving in seemingly random patterns. What are they doing? Rand demanded. Before anyone could answer, the first wave of missiles launched. Not hundreds, not thousands, tens of thousands. They filled the space between the two fleets like a swarm of angry insects, each one moving with its own purpose. Some were real weapons, carrying warheads powerful enough to crack a ship's hull. Some were decoys, designed to confuse targeting systems. Some released clouds of reflective chaff that scattered sensor beams. And hidden among them were the smart missiles, weapons that communicated with each other, that adapted to enemy countermeasures, that worked together like a pack of predators. The point defense systems tried to respond, but there were simply too many targets. Explosions bloomed across the formation as missiles found their marks. 3 destroyers vanished in balls of fire. A cruiser listed helplessly as its engines failed. A carrier lost its flight deck and began venting atmosphere. Return fire, Rand roared. All ships return fire. The weapons were powerful, but they were designed for conventional combat against conventional enemies. They expected their targets to stay in formation, to present clear firing solutions, to behave predictably. The humans did none of these things. Aboard the destroyer Swift Justice, Captain pushed her ship through maneuvers that would have torn apart vessels of lesser construction. Human ships were overbuilt by galactic standards, with redundant systems and reinforced hulls that other species considered wasteful. Now that engineering philosophy proved its worth. "Hard to port," commanded. "Fire pattern Delta, then get us out of here." Her ship twisted through space, weapons blazing, scoring hits on a cruiser before vanishing behind a cloud of sensor-jamming chaff. 2 seconds later, she reappeared on the cruiser's opposite flank and fired again. "They cannot track us," her tactical officer reported with grim satisfaction. "Their targeting computers cannot predict our movements." "That is because we are not moving in patterns," replied. "We are moving like humans, unpredictable, creative, crazy." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out hundreds of times. Human ships struck and retreated, appeared and vanished, worked together in ways that seemed almost telepathic. They did not try to match the in direct combat. Instead, they fought like the predators their ancestors had been on Earth. They fought like hunters. On the bridge of the Enduring Promise, Grace watched the battle unfold with cold satisfaction. The Cascade Protocol was working even better than she had hoped. The fleet was in chaos, individual ships trying to respond to threats that came from every direction. Admiral Danny Brooks reported, "Enemy flagship identified. The Crushing Fist. Warlord Ran is aboard." "Can we reach it?" "Not directly. It is surrounded by escorts, but we can create an opening." Grace nodded. "Do it. Commodore, your strike division has the honor. Take out that flagship." His voice came back immediately. "With pleasure, Admiral." His destroyers formed up and drove straight into the heart of the formation. They did not try to dodge or weave. They simply advanced at maximum speed, weapons blazing, shields absorbing punishment that would have destroyed any other ships. Human ships were tough, human crews were tougher. 2 destroyers died in the assault, their crews sacrificing themselves to create a path. But the others broke through, and suddenly the Crushing Fist was exposed. Ship the Relentless fired everything it had: missiles, energy beams, kinetic rounds. The flagship's shields flickered and failed. Secondary explosions ripped along its hull. Its engines went dark. On the command deck, Rand stared at the damage reports in disbelief. His ship was crippled, his fleet was in disarray, and the humans kept coming. "What are these creatures?" he whispered. His tactical officer pulled up data on the display. "Earth. There. It is classified as a death world, warlord, extreme temperature variations, predators on every continent, diseases that would kill most species, natural disasters that occur regularly. They evolved in an environment that tried to kill them every single day." "Then how are they here? How did they survive?" "They did not just survive, Warlord. They thrived. They conquered their planet. They tamed it, and then they reached for the stars." The tactical officer's voice was shaking. "They are not like other species. They do not give up. They do not surrender. They adapt. They overcome. They win." Rand looked at where human ships danced through his dying fleet like flames through dry grass. He had conquered 11 worlds. He had never known fear. He knew it now. The battle raged for 18 hours. By the end, the fleet had been reduced to less than 100 ships, most of them damaged and drifting. Human losses were 41 ships destroyed, another 60 damaged. Thousands of human lives lost. But they had won. Grace stood on her bridge and looked at the aftermath. Wreckage filled space around. Below, the planet still burned. But no more bombs were falling. No more cities were being destroyed. The had been saved. "Admiral," Danny said quietly, "the surviving ships are requesting terms. They want to surrender." Grace nodded slowly. The anger that had driven her was fading, replaced by something more complex: satisfaction, sorrow, and something else. "Mercy. Open a channel to all vessels," she said. "Tell them we accept their surrender. Tell them they may retrieve their dead and wounded. Tell them that humanity does not destroy those who have already been defeated." Danny looked at her with surprise. "Admiral, after what they did?" Grace thought of the captain from 300 years ago. "We help because we can. This is what civilized beings do." "We came here to settle a debt," she said. "We came here to honor the mercy that was shown to our ancestors. If we become like then their cruelty wins even in defeat." She paused. "We are better than that. We will prove it." The message went out. The guns fell silent, and across the galaxy, watching species began to realize that something extraordinary had happened. Humanity had not just won a battle. They had announced who they really were. The surface of looked like a nightmare. Dr. Torres stepped off the medical shuttle and felt her heart break. The city had been one of the most beautiful places in the galaxy. Its towers had been made of living coral, grown over centuries into graceful spires that glowed with soft bioluminescence. Its gardens had been legendary, home to flowers that sang when the wind blew through them. Now there was only rubble and ash. "Dr. Torres," a voice called. She turned to see a young medic named Christopher Bailey running toward her, his face pale. "We have found survivors, a shelter beneath the central plaza, over 2,000, mostly children." Nodded briskly. "Get the portable medical station set up, triage anyone who needs immediate surgery, and find me translators. We need to communicate with them." "Yes, doctor." She watched him run off, then looked around at the devastation. Human medical teams were spreading out across the ruins, working alongside whatever survivors they could find. Hospital ships hung in low orbit, their shuttles constantly moving between ground and space, carrying the wounded to safety. It was not enough. It would never be enough. 30 million had died in the bombardment, entire families erased, generations of history destroyed. They had not just attacked a world, they had tried to erase a people. But humanity had stopped them. Walked through the ruins, helping where she could. She treated burns and fractures. She held the hands of the dying. She watched parents weep over the bodies of their children, and she wept with them. After 16 hours without sleep, she found herself in a makeshift hospital tent, performing surgery on an elder whose lung had been punctured by shrapnel. The physiology was different from human, but not so different that she could not adapt. That was what humans did. They adapted. "Doctor," her assistant said, "you need to rest. You have been working since we landed." "There are more patients," replied without looking up. "I can sleep when they are stable." "You will collapse if you keep going." "Then I will collapse." Her hands moved with steady precision, closing the wound, repairing the damage. "They saved 40,000 of our people 3 centuries ago. They worked for 17 days without rest. I can do the same." The assistant fell silent. There was nothing to say. Across the city, similar scenes played out everywhere. Human engineers worked to restore power to damaged shelters. Human pilots flew rescue missions into areas still choked with smoke and debris. Human soldiers stood guard against looters and provided security for refugee camps. And everywhere, they watched with their large, luminescent eyes. They did not understand. An elderly female approached Christopher Bailey as he was setting up a water purification station. Her skin was dull with age and trauma, her movements slow and pained, but her eyes were clear. "Why," she asked through her translator, "why are you here?" Christopher paused in his work. "Because you needed help. But we are nothing to you. We have no resources, no military, no strategic value. They came to destroy us because we sheltered refugees. Now you have made an enemy of the Dominion to save us. Why would you do this?" Christopher thought about the question. He was 26 years old, born on a colony world called New Portland. He had learned about in school, had grown up hearing the story of the colony's ship rescue. But it had always seemed like ancient history, something that happened to other people. Now he was standing in the ruins of an alien city, helping a species he had never met. and somehow it felt like the most natural thing in the world. 300 years ago, he said slowly, your people found a ship full of humans who were dying. You did not know us. We could not pay you. We had nothing to offer except our gratitude, but you helped us anyway. He smiled gently. You asked for nothing in return. You just helped because you could. The elderly's eyes grew moist with tears. That was so long ago, many generations. We had forgotten. We did not forget, Christopher said. Humans never forget kindness. It is one of our best qualities. He paused. And one of our most dangerous for anyone who threatens those who have been kind to us. The reached out with her three-fingered hand and touched Christopher's cheek. It was a gesture of affection among her people, something reserved for family and close friends. Thank you, she said. Thank you for remembering. Elsewhere in the ruins, Grace walked among the survivors. She had come down from the enduring promise to see the aftermath for herself, to understand what her fleet had fought to protect. It was worse than she had imagined. An aide found her standing in what had once been a school. The small desks were scattered and broken. The walls were covered with children's artwork, now scorched and faded. In the corner, a mother cradled the body of her daughter, her keening cry echoing through the empty halls. Admiral, the aide said softly, you have a message from Admiral. They are withdrawing from the system. They are honoring the surrender terms. Grace nodded but did not look away from the grieving mother. Good. Admiral asks if we should pursue. We could catch them, destroy the remaining ships. No. But Admiral, after what they did. Grace finally turned to face her aide. Her eyes were wet with tears, but her voice was steady. They showed mercy to our ancestors. They did not ask what we might do with the gift of life they gave us. They simply helped because it was right. She gestured at the devastation around them. If we if we slaughter them after they have surrendered, then we become what they are. We lose the thing that makes us worth saving. The galaxy might not understand, Admiral. They might see it as weakness. Grace shook her head. Then they will misunderstand us. That is acceptable. What matters is that we understand ourselves. She paused. We came here to honor a debt. We came here to prove that the mercy shown to us 3 centuries ago was not wasted. If we abandon that mercy now, then we have failed even in victory. The aide was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I understand, Admiral. I will relay your orders. Thank you. Grace turned back to watch the grieving mother. After a moment, she walked forward and knelt beside her. She did not speak. There were no words that could help. She simply sat there, a human admiral in the ruins of an alien school, and shared the grief of a mother who had lost everything. Sometimes that was all anyone could do. Above the ruined cities, the human fleet maintained its vigil. Medical ships continued their work. Engineers began planning the reconstruction, and slowly, carefully, the survivors began to emerge from their shelters. They had lost so much. Their cities were gone. Their families were broken. Their world would take generations to heal. But they were alive. And they had learned something that would spread across the galaxy like a wave. They had learned that 3 centuries ago, their ancestors had made a choice to help some strange creatures called humans. That choice had been repaid with a debt of blood and sacrifice. They had shown mercy. Humanity had honored it. And the galaxy would never forget what that meant. The Galactic Council had not held an emergency session in over 100 years. The great chamber on the station called Unity Prime could seat representatives from 300 species, and today it was full. Diplomats, ambassadors, observers, and journalists packed every available space. The air hummed with 1,000 different languages being processed through translation devices. Everyone wanted to hear what would happen next. Ambassador Maria Santos represented humanity at the session. She was a small woman with gray-streaked hair and calm brown eyes. She had been a diplomat for 30 years, had negotiated treaties and trade agreements across a dozen worlds. but she had never faced a moment like this. The council president, an ancient being from a species called the session to order. His voice echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. This emergency session has been called to discuss the recent conflict in the system. The Dominion launched an unprovoked attack on resulting in approximately 30 million civilian casualties. The United Human Fleet subsequently intervened, defeating the forces and ending the bombardment. He paused. We will hear from both parties. The delegation will speak first. A massive figure rose from the section. Maria recognized him from intelligence reports. General, one of the highest-ranking military officers in the Dominion. He was covered with ritual scars, his yellow eyes burning with barely contained emotion. She expected anger. She expected threats. She expected to demand reparations, to accuse humanity of aggression, to twist the truth until they appeared as victims. Instead, bowed his head. The Dominion acknowledges its actions against the people, he said, his deep voice carrying through the chamber. We attacked a peaceful world because they sheltered refugees from our conquests. We believed this was our right as a conquering power. We believed that might made right, that the strong could do as they wished to the weak. He looked up, and his eyes found Maria across the chamber. We were wrong. A murmur ran through the assembly. This was not what anyone had expected. The human fleet came to defend continued. They were outnumbered, our ships were more powerful, our warriors were more experienced. By every measure of strength that the Dominion has ever used, we should have won. He paused. We did not win, we were destroyed. He began to walk forward, down the central aisle toward the human delegation. Guards tensed, but Maria raised her hand to stop them. But that is not what haunts me, said. We have lost battles before. What haunts me is what happened after. He stopped in front of Maria and looked down at her. You could have killed us all. Your fleet was victorious. Our ships were crippled. We were helpless. Yes, Maria agreed quietly. We could have. But you did not. You offered surrender terms. You allowed us to retrieve our dead. You healed our wounded. His voice cracked slightly. I have served the Dominion for 40 years. In that time we have conquered 11 worlds. Never once did we show such mercy to our enemies. Never once did we even consider it. He turned to face the full council. The humans taught us something. They taught us that true strength is not measured only in weapons and warriors. It is measured in the choices we make when we have power over others. He looked back at Maria. 3 centuries ago, they helped a human ship in distress. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. Today, humanity crossed the galaxy to repay that kindness. They fought and died for a species that could never repay them. He lowered himself to one knee before Maria. A gasp ran through the chamber. A general had never knelt before anyone. The Dominion formally cedes all claims to space, announced. We will pay reparations for the damage we have caused. And I, General, ask the humans to teach us how they became so strong while remaining so compassionate. Because that is a strength we have never possessed, and I believe it is the only strength that truly matters. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Maria reached down and touched his shoulder. Rise, General, she said gently. They do not need to kneel to learn this lesson. They only need to remember it. She paused. Mercy is not weakness. Kindness is not foolishness. The strength to fight and the wisdom to stop fighting are both necessary for any civilization that wishes to endure. Rose slowly. Will humanity accept our request? Maria smiled. We will, because 300 years ago, someone was kind to us when they did not have to be. That kindness changed what we might have become. Perhaps the same can happen for the session continued for several more hours. Treaties were signed. Agreements were reached. The representative wept openly as the galaxy pledged to help rebuild his world. Observers from 100 species recorded everything, knowing that this day would be studied for centuries. But the most important moment came later. In a private meeting between Maria and representatives from several of the most powerful species in the galaxy. "Your actions have changed the balance of power," the president said. "Every aggressive empire in the galaxy is now wondering if they have friends of humanity that they have mistreated." "Good," Maria replied. "Perhaps they will think twice before attacking the innocent. Some are terrified of you. They say that humanity is too dangerous, too unpredictable, too emotional." Maria nodded. "We are all of those things. We form attachments that other species consider irrational. We remember kindnesses for centuries. We build weapons of terrible power and then choose not to use them." She paused. "But we also remember cruelties. We remember those who hurt us or our friends, and we have very, very long memories." The studied her with his ancient eyes. "Is that a threat, Ambassador?" "No," Maria said. "It is a promise. Humanity does not seek to conquer. We do not wish to dominate. We want to explore, to learn, to build relationships with other species." Her voice hardened slightly. "But we protect our friends. The galaxy should understand that now. Those who show us kindness will find that kindness returned 100-fold. Those who threaten our friends will find us standing in their way." She stood and straightened her uniform. 300 years ago, they could have ignored a crippled human ship. Instead, they spent 17 days saving strangers who could never repay them. That single act of kindness earned them the loyalty of an entire species, across centuries. She looked at each of the representatives in turn. "I suggest you consider what that means for the future of galactic relations." Far away, in orbit above the slowly healing world of, Admiral Grace stood on the observation deck of the Enduring Promise. Construction ships filled the space around the planet, human and crews working together to rebuild what had been destroyed. Admiral joined her at the viewport. "The Council has announced the doctrine," said. "Any species that attacks a friend of humanity will face full human intervention. Half the aggressive empires in the galaxy are suddenly very interested in diplomatic relations. And the other half, terrified as they should be." Grace watched a transport pass by, its running lights blinking in a pattern that her translator identified as a signal of friendship and gratitude. "Do you think they understand us now?" asked. "The galaxy, I mean." Grace considered the question. Humanity was young among the stars. They were emotional, chaotic, unpredictable by galactic standards. They made decisions that seemed irrational to species that had been spacefaring for millions of years. "No," she said finally. "I do not think they will ever truly understand us. We are too different from most of them. We care too much. We remember too long. We fight too hard for things that other species would consider unimportant." "Is that a problem?" Grace smiled slightly. "No, it is who we are." She turned from the viewport. "They did not understand us 300 years ago. They helped us anyway, simply because it was the right thing to do. That one act of kindness shaped everything that came after. And now the galaxy knows what that kindness bought them. They know that humanity pays its debts in full, no matter how long it takes." She paused. "And they know that if they want humanity as a friend, all they have to do is be kind. Not to us necessarily, just kind. To anyone who needs it." Nodded slowly. "That is a powerful message." "Yes," Grace agreed, "it is." Outside the viewport, the stars burned with ancient light. Somewhere out there, 100 different species were looking up at those same stars and thinking about the strange, fierce, compassionate creatures called humans. Some felt fear, some felt hope, some felt a mixture of both. The galaxy trembled. But it was not just with terror. It was with the dawning realization that kindness could be the most powerful force in the universe, and that humanity would make sure it stayed that way.